In the previous video, we talked a lot about nouns. Today, we're going to be talking about verbs, perhaps one of the most challenging concepts of SAT grammar, but the most fruitful. Verbs can come out in numerous styles of questions, ranging from verb tense, subject-verb agreement, and even sentence structure questions. So we better get to it. Hey guys, this is Mikey from Avo Prep Academy, and in this playlist, we're going through all of the grammar fundamentals. And today, we're talking about verbs. As you may already be familiar, verbs refer to words that portray some action or perhaps identity. For instance, we might use the verb throw to indicate such an action, while verbs such as is or have can denote an identity of equality or possession. But before we get too carried away, let's just preface our discussion of verbs by acknowledging something that's not all that important, but may play a role in understanding some parts of this video. And that is that verbs can either be regular or irregular. This difference is most clearly seen in the way verbs are put into their simple past form, and that's a term that we'll discuss in a moment. But regular verbs like play simply become played to denote their past actions, while irregular verbs like swim would become swam in their past form. There are additional differences that we'll explore later, but for now, let's just note this fact and flag it. Now, we've already mentioned that verbs convey action, but it turns out that there are a whole other set of verbs that seem to play different roles within the sentence. Other verb forms such as infinitives like to swim or to play, or participles like swimming or playing, do not actually convey action being performed by some subject within the sentence, but can play very different roles. And this is sort of where we'll begin by first splitting our understanding of verbs into two major categories: tenses and these other forms that we'll call verbals. But for the sake of simplicity and what you're already used to, let's explore the tenses first. These are our standard verbs that can convey action that is linked to the taker of said action. For the SAT, we're expected to know the usage of various verb tenses, so it's important to note what they are first. So let's begin by understanding that for any action being described in a sentence, it is of utmost importance to denote just when that action takes place. This is because humans are complicated. Dogs, like my dog Charlie here, has like 3 time frames. Did I eat? Am I hungry? When is Mikey gonna feed me? But humans, well, we'll get deeper than that. We can say things like, man, I wish I had studied a bit more before taking my SAT last weekend, to denote 2 past events, or bro, I should really stop procrastinating before I go off to college, to talk about what you're doing now versus what you wish to do later. And as such, the English language contains 12 tenses that can help us capture these minute and sometimes important distinctions in just when these actions are taking place. Now, even though I've been referring to these as tenses, there's actually 2 things at work here. There's the tense, and then there's the aspects. See, there are 3 tenses and 4 aspects that can combine in all these permutations to create a total of 12 forms. Now, I'll put up a table up on the screen at this time. As it is pretty evident from this table, the 3 elements of time that we call tense is shown as past, present, and future. These tenses are combined with aspects that can clarify and further partition events upon a timeline. Now, these aspects are simple, continuous, perfect, and perfect continuous. Now, let's go ahead and fill in this chart with an irregular verb like to swim using the subject I. In the simple present, we have I swim. Simple past, I swam. Future, I will swim. Continuous is easy too. We're quite familiar with these. I am swimming, I was swimming, and I will be swimming, and they'll work just fine. Now, perfect is where it gets a little bit tricky. Here, we have to use this swum, which is sort of that third form of the chant that we learned in school, right? Swim, swam, swum. But by combining this swum with the verb to have or had, we can make our perfect tenses. And perfect continuous is just simply combining the ing form with that have-had verb structure, where we would get the combinations like I have been swimming, I had been swimming, and so on. Now that we've filled out this table, I'm sure many, if not all of you, have used these tenses in your day-to-day speech or writing. This lesson today is, after all, not meant to be a comprehensive grammar review, but rather a very specific tool in solving SAT grammar. And as such, I'll be focusing on specific tenses and aspects that you need to be familiar with and be able to discern for the SAT. Now, for the exam, here are the following tenses that you need to know really well: simple present, simple past, present perfect, and past perfect. So let's go ahead and explore each one of these tenses. Let's begin with simple present. Interesting thing about the simple present tense is that it's neither simple nor present. That is, that we don't use the simple present to convey action that is currently happening right now. Rather, the simple present tense can be used to denote facts about the subject that can be generalizable. This could be a description or habitual behavior that typify the subject. For instance, we might say the following: most dogs enjoy going on walks. In this example, we're not stating that any particular set of dogs are currently enjoying walks, which I'm sure they are, but rather a generalizable fact about dogs that is timeless. And another example might be something like this: on Tuesdays, I attend my school's choir ensemble practice. Again, we're looking at a generalizable fact that happens to be a habitual or a recurring activity, which would appropriately call for the usage of a simple present tense verb. Now, due to the academic nature of SAT, many passages employ the simple present tense when describing works of fiction, be it novels, plays, or films, or facts about animals or plants. For instance, we may see a description of a Shakespearean play in the following way: Romeo and Juliet tells the story of a couple who, due to their family pedigree, find themselves in precarious circumstances. In this example, the verb tells and find are both in the simple present form because these are generalizable facts about the play and facts about the plot within the play itself, and every time you open Romeo and Juliet, the same thing's going to happen over and over and over again. Next, we'll tackle the triforce of verbs: simple past, present perfect, and past perfect. Now, thankfully, we can group all three of these tenses together because the task on the SAT is to understand their differences and detect their proper usage case for each one of them. Now, simple past is exactly as it sounds. Sentences like "I played Stardew Valley this morning" or "I was in Boy Scout" both describe actions or identifications that occurred in the past at some point. However, present perfect and past perfect are two that are most often conflated, so let's lay out their correct usages here. Now, the present perfect has many possible uses, but for the purpose of the SAT, the main usage is in describing actions that began in the past and is still continuing in the present. Let's take a look at an example. I have played soccer for 10 years. In this example, we can infer that the subject began playing soccer a decade ago, but still continues to play today. Had the sentence read, "I played soccer for 10 years," we would assume that the subject did play for 10 years, but no longer actively participates in the activity in the present moment. So present perfects always need to include actions that are currently taking place. But what about the past perfect? Well, past perfect is used to describe a past event that occurred prior to another past event. Something being perfected prior to another past event is another way to think about it. So here's an example. Before Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas, the Vikings had already explored the west coast of North America. In this example, the insertion of the adverb already does not take away from the fact that we are, in fact, using had explored in order to indicate that this exploration occurred prior to the simple past discovered, of course, being conducted by Christopher Columbus. Conceptually, these differences among the three verb tenses and aspects seem crystal clear. However, the exam can make this differentiation a little bit more challenging. But here's a tip to remember. Both present perfect and past perfect are often associated with other clues or keywords that further illustrate or buttress how that action is actually being described. Let's explore these key terms for a moment. For present perfect, we often see that the sentence includes words such as since or for some number of years. For instance, since 2015, McDonald's has incorporated a broader range of healthy options to alter their brand image. Here, we're using that has incorporated that pairs perfectly with the keyword since, as the word since quite literally denotes something that began in the past, continuing on to the present. On the other hand, past perfects are typically paired with keywords such as before or prior to, again indicating some action that took place before another past action. Now let's take a look at some real SAT questions on this very topic. Like other amphibians, the wood frog, Rana sylvatica, is unable to generate its own heat. So during periods of sub-freezing temperatures, it blank by producing large amount of glucose, a sugar that helps prevent damaging ice from forming inside its cells. Now we have these choices: had survived, survived, would survive, and survives. In this example, we see that the topic is a description or a generalizable fact about a particular frog species, and as such, we would choose a simple present survives for the right answer. However, we do see that the SAT introduces a new word here, which is a modal verb like would. While modal verbs are not tested directly in the grammar section, just note that words like would, may, can, or should all just simply necessitate the verb to be in their base form, like I may run home quickly or I could eat, but I'm not hungry. But here's the thing, there's a plot twist here. The SAT is full of surprises, and though we've been focusing a lot on verb tenses for a little while now, I do have to mention something that's really important. When you see verbs on the SAT, most of the time, the questions that appear to test your ability to discern tenses are not actually tense questions at all. In fact, there's one attribute of verbs that we haven't discussed yet, and that is number. Now, this might sound familiar. If you've watched my previous video on nouns, we learned that nouns can be singular or plural, and it turns out that verbs have the same sort of ideas, where verbs can be matched to a singular noun or a plural noun with its singular and plural form. So more specifically, we say that verbs must agree in their form to the subject's number. So to make this point more clear, let's simply use two pronouns, it and they. In this case, it represents a singular pronoun, while they represents a plural pronoun. It moves, they move. In this simple demonstration, it is clear that the verbs change in accordance to whether the subject is singular or plural, and as such, the SAT will use this distinction to create questions that masquerade as a tense question. Let's take a look at a clear example of this type too. In the music video for the song We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel, the singer lists 118 political and cultural references. Such iconic references cited in rapid and frenetic procession by the musician who is seated impassively at a dinner table blank key moments and personalities of the 20th century. We have A represents, B has represented, C was representing, and D represent. Now in this example, our first pass makes it appear as though we're trying to select present simple, present perfect, past continuous, or another present simple. Yet one pattern that we have to detect is that 3 of the choices are singular verbs, while only 1 is a plural verb. To take the elementary approach using pronouns, we can say this out loud in our minds. It represents, it has represented, it was representing, and they represent. For many native speakers, it becomes abundantly clear that saying they represents or it represent causes us to intuitively hit the brakes, as this reads as both colloquially and grammatically incorrect. This pattern forces us to reassess what this question is really asking. In fact, this is a question that pertains to the subject of our next video, which is called subject-verb agreement. But in this sentence, the subject that is representing is such iconic references, a plural noun. As such, option D with a plural form is the only possible answer, forcing us to choose a present simple as the de facto tense in the sentence without any other time element necessary. This plot twist forces us to reassess how we approach verb questions. If the question offers several possible verbs with a 3-to-1 ratio of numbers, be it 3 singulars versus 1 plural or vice versa, then we should be analyzing for subject-verb agreements. Yet, in other scenarios, if the question simply offers several verb tenses that could equally be connected to a singular or a plural subject, then we must pay attention to the timing of the action. Knowing this difference will save you time and improve your accuracy. Now let's finish up today's lesson on verbs by discussing what we had put off earlier, the 3 verbals or these other verb forms. Now verbals are quite versatile, and we'll be covering them again later in another video when it comes to complete versus incomplete sentences. But for now, let's focus on the role of infinitives, participles, and gerunds. Infinitives are said to be these basic forms of verbs that follow the structure like to blank. For instance, to swim, to run, or even to be are all infinitive examples. The important thing to note about infinitives is that they do not connect to a subject to imply action. For instance, you can't simply say I to run to denote that you're running. So infinitives are typically used to capture the nature of the action that the verb conveys, as they typically act as objects of sentences. So for instance, we might say, I love to read. In this example, the main verb that carries the action of I is love. The infinitive to read simply acts as the direct object that receives the action of the verb love. Now participles come in 2 forms, present participles and past participles. Let's discuss the present participle first. The present participles follows the format ing. So words like swimming, running, or being are all present participles. But wait, we saw these ing forms of verbs in continuous tenses, and this is true, but in that usage, we saw these present participles being preceded by am or was, such as am running or was running in the formation of that proper tense structure. On its own, however, these present participles cannot depict actions as demonstrated by the incomplete sentence such as I running home. Because in English, these present participles typically play the role of adjectives. I saw a running dog is a great example of this. in this sentence, we can clearly see that the participle running is being used as a descriptor of the noun dog, thereby taking on the role of an adjective. And there is one more role of this ing form, which is when we use them as what we call gerunds. Now, gerunds are when these present participles take on the role of a noun. So for instance, when we say things like running is my favorite activity or smiling will make you happier, well, these are cases in which these ing forms are being used as nouns that can actually receive a verb of their own. Now, past participles are a bit tougher to recognize. In regular verbs such as to play, the past participle form is played, which looks identical to the simple past tense. But in irregular verbs, the past participle takes on that whole new form, such as in the case of swum. Ultimately, the past participles are often taught as the third form of the verb that we recited as children in grade school. Ring, rang, rung, read, 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 swim, swam, swum, and of course in regular verbs, scratch, scratched, and scratched. And in this chant, the structure is base form, simple past, and then the past participle. But it turns out that these past participles can also act as adjectives in sentences. But if this is true, we have to determine how present and past participles, with their distinct forms, can both act as adjectives in different ways. So let's explore two examples. The baking lady was busy in the kitchen. The baked cookies were all sold out by the afternoon. In the first example, the present participle baking is used as an adjective to modify a noun capable of carrying out the actions being conveyed by the verb. The lady is capable of baking and she was busy in the kitchen. But in the second example, the past participle baked is used as an adjective to modify a noun that is capable of receiving the action of baking. The difference is akin to the common slang among Gen Z, cooking versus cooked. To say that you're cooking versus cooked have opposite connotations, and it really is for the exact same reasons that we've just described in this section, that those two words have very different meanings depending on whether it's carrying out the action or receiving the action. Alright, even though there's so much more to say about verbs, we'll kind of end the lesson here because in the next video, we'll dive much deeper into verbs again in subject-verb agreement, as well as talking about sentence structures and the importance of verbs within clauses. But for now, if you found this video useful, be sure to like and subscribe so you can stay on top of more videos that are coming to your devices very soon. This has been Mikey with Avo Prep Academy. Have a good one.